Good morning, Baltimore. It is Tuesday, July 7th, and thank you for tuning in to the latest episode of the Early Birds podcast. I'm your host, Matt Weyrich, alongside Ravens reporter Sam Cohn. It is an unusual Tuesday episode for us today with the holiday weekend, traveling, and also the Orioles not playing on Monday. Figured we'd push it back a day to talk about the series as well as the upcoming homestand, and Adley Rutschman being tapped as the Orioles All-Star representative. Sam, you obviously had just been in Portugal, so I imagine you didn't do much travel for July 4th. How was it?
No, I stayed around here, and I also did not get quite as sunburnt as it looks like you did. Yeah, I had a good time. Just hung out with some friends. We were by the pool a little bit, went to a friend's and grilled some hot dogs and burgers and kind of just hung out and enjoyed braved the hottest part of the day in the middle of the day, and then got a little bit better as we got to the afternoon. Sun started to go down, and watched some fireworks at night. So it was good. Watched the hot dog eating competition. Did my best to compete with Joey Chestnut in that respect, and had fun.
He's
What
the
about
goat
you?
for a reason.
That's right.
Joey Chestnut, goat for a reason. Yeah, it was good. Like you said, a little bit sunburned here. My wife Madison and I went up to Cape Cod for a trip we had been planning for a little while. And in true Matt fashion, I always seem to do this: go the entire trip without getting sunburnt until the very last day. It's a little parting gift.
That's evil.
Yeah, it always happens to me. Happened the same thing spring training, literally right before my flight too. So I literally on the flight was like feeling the burn, like, oh, I messed up on the last day, not wearing the sunscreen. Always think I can get away with it. I can't. But no, it was great. Got to
You would think
go
at a
around
certain
Cape
point
Cod.
you'd learn, like, make sure wear sunscreen the most on the last day. You know yourself by now, but no.
I go the whole time without getting burnt, so I'm like, I get more and more confident that like, oh, I don't need as much sunscreen as I was putting on, and then inevitably.
That's so funny.
What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
But no, it was a good time. Got to the beach. I went out to Martha's Vineyard, which was really cool. Had never been up in that area before, so took the ferry out there and took a little tour around town. It was awesome. So good to get a little bit of an escape here as we get into the final homestand of the first half for the Orioles. We'll get into that in a little bit, but All-Star game is looming. All-Star break, much needed one perhaps for this team that has certainly performed under expectations this year, but is coming off a series win in Cincinnati. But before we get to all that, the big news of the weekend: Adley Rutschman was named the Orioles All-Star representative for this year's Midsummer Classic. The Orioles' lone representative this year, after Ryan O'Hearn was their lone representative last year. That could change, but certainly for Rutschman, a deserving candidate, his third career selection, leading the Orioles in multiple categories right now, hitting .254 with 8 home runs, 18 doubles, and 45 RBIs in 60 games. He has missed a little bit of time with injury and comes in here as a reserve with the Athletics' Shea Langoliers going to be the starter behind the plate, and Dylan Dingler of the Detroit Tigers also joining on the team. So the good thing about catcher is you're kind of guaranteed for Rutschman to see a couple of innings in this All-Star game. So he'll probably get 3 innings behind the plate, would be my guess, with 3 catchers. So we'll probably see 1, maybe 2 at-bats of Rutschman here in the All-Star game, and a chance for, the rest of the league to see who has been, to this point, I think, pretty deservingly the Orioles' best player.
Yeah, and he joined an esteemed list. Your beat partner extraordinaire, Jacob Calvin-Meyer, tweeted out the list of he's the 11th catcher in MLB history to earn 3 All-Star selections in his first 4 seasons. Among that list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them are Hall of Famers. About half that list is Hall of Famers. So certainly an impressive mark for Adley this early in his career.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that Samuel Basallo, by offensive numbers alone, might be a little bit more deserving, ahead of him in multiple offensive categories. Their slash lines are pretty similar overall, but Basallo played a couple of more games too at the time that Rutschman has missed. But when you factor in the defense, with the strides that Adley Rutschman has taken behind the plate this year, been fantastic at throwing out base runners, one of the best rates of his career at that part of the game, as well as his pitch framing, which in today's game is so important and valued super highly, and represented in Fangraph's F4 category, which he firmly has a lead over Basallo there. I believe it's 2.0 to 1.1. So I think certainly Rutschman has been the better catcher. If you're taking every aspect of that position into account, it's one of the most important positions on the diamond. So Basallo, a guy who's probably going to have a lot of all-star selections throughout his career. I saw some conversations on Twitter of people saying it should have been Basayo. Look at his numbers. He's been healthy. He's been out there all year. I get that, but a lot of his starts compared to Rutschman's coming at DH, with Adley taking the lion's share of the starts at the actual catcher position. So I think deserving and really representative of the season that the Orioles are having and who has been a huge part of that to this point. I mean, the Orioles obviously not playing up to expectations, but Rutschman has been a huge part of why they're maybe not a bit farther down the standings right now.
And with how well, but you mentioned Basayo, with how well he's playing this year, and what was an obvious trajectory for him over the last 2 to 3 years. There were certainly folks who were thinking in the back of her head, like, what do they do here? Do you move on from Basayo? Do you sell high on Basayo, or do you say, hey, Adley, who was our really our franchise player, do you move on from him and let Basayo backfill that position? They found a way to go with both, but it's just cool to see Adley on that note. That conversation is ample. What I'm trying to say is that conversation was kind of amplified last year when Adley has such a down year. To see him have that resurgence, to see the Orioles find ways to play good baseball with both of those guys, has been great. And I mean, just good for Adley to be able to bounce back. Last year, as we know, was so frustrating for him. It was such a talking point last year, this offseason, coming into this year, and throughout this year, of him just kind of being able to get the train back on the tracks, and he's been really good.
Yeah, I don't think there's any debate now that the Orioles have the best catching tandem in baseball. To have one guy being an all-star caliber player and another to have just as good as an offensive season to this point, to be in this discussion, I think really cements that. And for the Orioles to be able to have Rutschman, who is a refined catcher, somebody who has really come together as a complete player at the position, and to have a young player in Basayo who can, as we saw this weekend with 2 home runs, take over a game almost with his power and his bat. The defense is still coming along, but a very young player who clearly has a tantalizing future and signed long-term to be a part of that Orioles future for the next 8 seasons. So between the two of them, the Orioles have to be thrilled with what they have gotten behind the plate this year. But like you said, Rutschman, we weren't sure that we were going to see this version of Adley maybe ever again after the last 2 years. I mean, there were certainly some skeptics out there that were calling for the Orioles to sell low and trade him over the offseason with Basayo, coming up and having signed his extension last year. And now, while that would not have been good business for the Orioles to do, it is now clear that he is a much better player than we might have thought last year with the injuries that he was going through and the down second half that he had in 2024. He has gotten back to his form. And as we talked about before, it's not maybe the same exact Adley Rutschman at the plate that we saw a couple of years ago. The OBP is a bit farther down. There's a little bit more power this year, but the complete package defensively, coupled with the power surge that he has had, particularly in doubles. I believe he's second among all AL catchers in doubles this year. We've seen Adley Rutschman get back to being the Adley Rutschman of old. And really now, I think, and this is kind of the meat of what I wanted to chew into here, is Adley Rutschman has kind of thrust himself back into the center of the conversation for the Orioles franchise player with his return to form this year. I mean, Gunnar Henderson is probably the Orioles' best player when at his best, right? And we've seen that in 2024, a fantastic year from him. Last year, took a step back in the power department, was dealing with a shoulder injury, and so far this year has not been the Gunnar Henderson we expect. But even if Gunnar was playing at his full capacity right now, I think we could still be talking about, with Adley having returned to form here, Adley Rutschman as the Orioles franchise player, obviously ushered in the current era that they're in right now. The number 1 pick, the first of the franchise, with Mike Elias taking over as general manager and getting up as quickly as he did, and for kind of the winning to follow ever since his debut. The team has been a better team than it was, obviously, during the rebuild. Maybe not reaching the full heights that they were hopeful this early into his career. Obviously, with a year and a half left, the clock is ticking for how long Adley Rutschman might be in Baltimore. But Rutschman right now, I think, is firmly cemented as the Orioles franchise player, and the guy that when you think of the Orioles, if you're somebody from across the league, you're probably thinking of Adley Rutschman first.
Completely agree. And when you have when you have a young core like the Orioles have, a lot of them were expected to be so great, and they've kind of gone in and out of these pockets of playing good baseball or overperforming, underperforming, maybe what you expected. It just hasn't all clicked at the same time. But when you have guys like Adley, like Gunnar, and even throw in Jackson Holliday, who was the number 1 prospect in baseball as well, they all have the opportunity at some point over the early stint in their career with a team that hasn't really gotten over the playoff hump to prove themselves to be the face of a team. They're such a young group, all homegrown, that any of them could come out and have a season, 2 seasons, into 3 seasons in a row that make them say that it's up. The idea of having a face of the franchise is up for grabs. What I'm trying to say, over the last 2 seasons or so, it's been like someone can go and get that. And because circumstantially Adley being kind of the first in that line, him, as you said, ushering the new era, like all of the signs pointed to like everything about the suffering that Orioles fans had to go through. Like Adley was the starting line of things are going to change. Have things completely changed, as we know? Not entirely, but he has been the best, most consistent, and face of everything that the Orioles have said that they're doing. And maybe they blow it up and that's gone in a couple of years. Maybe he's just gone in a couple of years and you have to kind of pivot. But I think circumstantially, he's just always been in that line of like, no matter what happens, it always comes back to him, because when you talk about this era of Orioles baseball, you're always going to talk about where things started with Adley, that one classic clip that they'll play for years of him, at home plate looking around at Camden Yards and realizing like he made it to that point. It will always come back to that moment for this era of Orioles baseball. So it's, as much as someone else could play well, Gunnar Henderson or whoever else, it does just feel like Adley is the face. As you said, when people think Orioles baseball, they're going to think Adley Rutschman.
And it's why it's not surprising how much Mike Elias has shot down trade rumors about him, not just in the last month when he spoke to the media, but also at the end of last season when asked about the potential of trading Adley Rutschman. Both times has talked about it's about Adley. It's, he is a guy that clearly he wants to be a big part of this future, even beyond the next year and a half. Hopefully an Oriole for life type player. The Orioles are a franchise that has had so much history with building around homegrown players, and Rutschman was first. He's the quintessential guy that you'd like to build around, the 1-1 pick who lived up to his potential. Obviously they could have drafted Bobby Witt Jr., that number 2 pick in that draft, and passing on a generational shortstop kind of could be considered a bad pick, but to get him at the 1-1 and Gunnar Henderson in the second round of that draft, I mean, certainly you feel pretty good about that duo and what they can do long term. But for Rutschman and what he has done for this franchise, I mean, like I said, the winning started when he took over. The Jacob tweeted out a graphic a couple weeks ago, or maybe last week, of all of the records since the Orioles did, certain benchmarks, because they are now under 500 in the David Rubenstein era. But since Adley Rutschman took over, still over 500 from that point, obviously with the great finish to 2022, and as well as the strong season 2023 and 91 wins in 24. So a lot of good things came after he took over. And, at the end of the day, to be the franchise player, you have to play well. And Rutschman is now doing that again. I mean, there were some doubts last year that he was ever going to be able to return to this kind of guy. And, with Basayo, potentially coming in and taking that job, we are in a very different world where potentially, Basayo is the number 1 catcher, and Rutschman, if he hadn't gotten back to who he was maybe relegated to a part-time role, as we saw more and more Basayo behind the plate. But that obviously hasn't happened. They found a way for these two guys to coexist and for Rutschman to be the front man for it. So certainly a deserved all-star appearance for him, and one that, I think is a very validating, not just for him, but for people in the front office and this organization, of Rutschman is the guy that we kind of push all our chips into and follow behind. And right now, he is certainly somebody who has been able to do that and show that, he is not somebody whose career is on a downward trend anymore.
Matt, to be the franchise player, you, as you said, absolutely have to be very good at baseball, but you also have to be someone who is willing to face the noise, willing to answer questions, willing to talk when your team is not performing up to snuff. And he hasn't always been that guy in his career, but it seems this year, perhaps more than ever in his career, he's been someone who you can go, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you're the one in the clubhouse every day, but it seems more than in recent years, he's been someone you can go to answer questions about things not going particularly well.
Yeah, look, Rutschman being a 1-1 pick, a college star, kind of came into, and being a number 1 prospect, excuse me, he kind of came into his MLB career already media trained, maybe more so
Yeah.
than as some unheralded prospect. And early in his career, wasn't much of a talker, and kind of experienced that myself in 24, my first year on the beat. Wasn't somebody, kind of gave a lot of, media answers, and didn't really put himself out there. And I felt like last year, actually, there was started to be a change in that, of him kind of opening up a little bit more, and being more willing to, explain things as they happened. And he's somebody who will always try to deflect any kind of praise. He'll always try to direct it at his teammates, and talk about how good they are, and would never disparage a teammate. But at the same time, is somebody who has grown into one of the veteran guys for this group, as all of these young core guys that we talk about, your Jackson Hollidays, your Gunnar Hendersons, your Kobe Mayos, your Colton Cowsers, whoever, all of them younger than Adley Rutschman, who also was around a lot of the older guys in your Anthony Santanders and your Cedric Mullins and Austin Hayes type guys, and been able to kind of follow their lead in now taking over as one of the older guys in the club. Still very young, obviously in his mid to late 20s here. I don't want to call him an unk just yet, but for Rutschman, I do think that he has kind of grown into that a little bit more. And being a catcher, that's somebody who just naturally has to be a leader. You're going to rely on them so much throughout a game. And he's earned a lot of praise from his game calling from pitchers and things like that. And certainly, some of the veteran pitchers maybe prefer to throw to him than Samuel Basallo at their current stages of their careers. Not Trevor Rogers, though. Trevor Rogers absolutely loves throwing to Samuel Basallo. But other than that, we have heard some of the veterans, talk about how great of a game caller and manager that of Adley Rutschman is. And for him to just kind of develop into this guy that he is now, it's somebody who I think the organization is thrilled to be able to follow behind right now, and call a franchise player, as they, try to obviously get back to being the winning organization, to get the rest of the group to follow in suit.
Consensus has kind of always said, like, hey, the Orioles have a window with this core, and it's not going to last forever. And a lot of them are going to go make big money once their rookie deal's up somewhere else. Do you feel like Adley's the most likely to be the one to stick around? If
Yeah,
you were to say one of them were the Orioles were to re-sign one of them, is Adley the most likely?
I think so. I mean, honestly, it starts with Scott Boras, and he represents Gunnar Henderson, Jackson Holliday, as well as Jordan Westberg. So those three right there. There just isn't much history of Scott Boras' clients signing extensions. It has happened. There have been examples throughout history, but there are definitely exceptions to the rule more than they are commonplace. So they're the type of guys that tend to go to free agency. Rutschman, closest to free agency out of that group as well, being a year and a half away now. So, if they were going to work out an extension, you would think it would be this offseason. I don't know if it's, I think the lockout kind of has a, comes into play here a little bit of, like, if there's going to be a salary cap, will previous deals get grandfathered into that system? If so, would it be, in the Orioles' best interest to sign an extension before the lockout, so that they can ensure that it gets grandfathered into whatever the new system ends up being, as opposed to signing it later when they might have to operate under certain constraints and things like that? Maybe that makes it more difficult to see an extension coming, depending on what their payroll looks like. I mean, the Orioles are right around the middle of the league payroll, so I imagine that they could fit an Adley Rutschman extension into a salary cap, whatever that might look like after this year. They're not a team like the Dodgers or the Mets that might have to reduce payroll later on. They're kind of right in the middle. So either way, they could probably wait. But I do wonder if that does prompt any kind of added urgency for Rutschman to get that done on the Orioles side.
Yeah, Matt, I don't know if you have anything else on Adley, but the Orioles took 2 out of 3 from the Reds this weekend, and I'm curious how concerned you are with their inability to win 4 straight. I think is it 7 now? Is the number of times they've won 3 straight games and lost the 4th? What a quirky and unfortunate stat. Yes, 0-7 when they win 3 games in that 4th game.
Yeah,
not great.
Not great. And certainly not emblematic of a team that is capable of going on the run that might be needed to climb back into contention, or if they were to make the playoffs, go on a run in October and make it deep. Because not that you have to win 4 games in a row to win a playoff series, but it certainly helps to be able to go on little runs there and take a couple of wins at a time from teams. So for the Orioles, they gotta get their season back, and that is kind of a one series at a time type thing. You
mathematically,
win 2 out of 3.
You need a run at some point. Like the way they started, math would say you have to do it at some point.
At some point. I mean, could they win 2 out of 3 of every series the rest of the way? Absolutely. That would be very statistically impossible for them to do, but they could. They could win 3 out of 5 the rest of the way, and maybe 3 out of every 5 the rest of the way, and maybe make the playoffs that way. But at the same time, if you go on a 8-game winning streak and you then lose a series, you're not under as much pressure as when you're kind of, when you win 3 straight series, right? Take 2 out of 3 each time, and then you lose a series that basically over that entire 4-game series span, you're like 1 game over 500 or whatever that math comes out to be. I mean, like
Yeah.
it kind of, you have to go and sweep a series every now and then, or go on a run to be able to make those winning series and losing series not cancel each other out. Because at the end of the day, if you're doing winning 2 out of 3 and then losing 2 out of 3 every time, you're going to go 500, and 500 is maybe could get you in the playoffs. And this current AL picture that we have, but they can't go 500 the rest of the way because
Yeah.
they're obviously 7 games under right now, which losing that finale, that chance to go with their 4th straight game on Sunday, they lose that, and that guaranteed that the Orioles would be under 500 by the time they hit the All-Star break, 7 games under with 6 games left to play. So they will not be a 500 team when they break for the All-Star break, but certainly with the way that they played this past weekend, it was better. I mean, the Reds are a team that have been struggling this year for sure. So you were expecting the Orioles to go in and win this series, and that's what they did. They took the first 2 games and got some solid starts. A good one from Trevor Rogers, who threw 5 scoreless, though he did have 5 walks in there, tied his career high, so kind of navigating a lot of traffic, but was able to kind of maintain the run that he's been on lately. Really impressive stuff that we've seen from him, I believe, over his last 8 starts, around an 1.8 ERA, which is what his ERA was last year. So maybe he's doing the thing again, as I tweeted the other day, but better results from Rogers of late. Brandon Young, not a great start. Only went 5 innings, 4 runs, but got the win, kept them in it. If your bad starts look like that, which Young has been arguably the Orioles' best pitcher so far this year, you're gonna be having a great year, and that's what Young is having so far. So kept them in it, and then Kyle Bradish, brilliant, carried a perfect game into the 5th inning in that finale, but gave up a 2-run home run, and then interestingly was kept out for the 8th inning, 2 outs, and Craig Albanez comes out to talk to him, and Bradish argues to stay in. Ultimately, does give up an RBI there, which
What did you
proved
make
to
of that
be
decision?
the winning run. I mean, I like showing confidence to your players personally. Like if he is adamant that he wants the ball, unless you have had those situations before and he has not come through, I think that he has the right to kind of argue and stay out there for an extra out. And there are not many guys that I would necessarily trust with that, but Kyle Bradish, largely over the last month, has looked like Kyle Bradish again, and I think he is starting to figure things out in a really big way. So I would not be surprised if we see a huge second half from Kyle Bradish this second half. I mean, I'm talking sub 2.5 ERA the rest of the way. I would take the under on that for sure. The way he's been pitching right now, he has been looking like an ace, pitching deep into games. He is a guy that if he is right, this rotation, kind of falls in line with everybody else the rest of the way. Because, we've always talked about the Orioles not having a number 1, but Kyle Bradish, when he is right, he is an ace. So we'll see what he can do the rest of the way. But certainly a good start for him regardless, even though he gets the loss. Bullpen pitched great in that series as well. And the lineup, inconsistent as it kind of has been. A good game on Saturday from Pete Alonso, reaching base 5 times, a couple of homers from Basayo, but overall, it's the pitching staff that is really keeping the Orioles in games right now.
Yeah, and the other thing we want to touch on too is that the defense came up big for them, both Gunnar and Colton Cowser, right?
Yeah, a couple of highlight reel plays from Gunnar at shortstop, which not a great series from him offensively, but holding his own with the glove this year, I think that's something that doesn't get talked about a lot. He's obviously, there's a lot of things going wrong with Gunnar Henderson's season. He got picked off again in this series. That's 5 pickoffs on the year, a really glaring number for him. And obviously the offensive numbers have not been there. But I do think that Gunnar Henderson has been a step better this year defensively. And he's just kind of continued to get better on defense throughout his career. Really in 2024 was talk about maybe they should move him back to third base because that's what he did in 23. He was kind of moving back and forth between the 2 positions. They stuck with him at 24, even though he had a bunch of errors. And 25 really took a step forward, but the analytics still didn't like him, just kind of cut down on the errors. And then this year, some of the analytics are starting to like his play a lot better. So been able to kind of round into the star shortstop on the defensive side that you'd expect from the player that kind of holds down such an important defensive position. And then Colton Cowser, who has just been fantastic defensively. I think, I mean, he's the center fielder now. And it almost gets down to it doesn't matter what he is doing offensively. He needs to be in the lineup every single day because of his glove. Saved the game on Saturday with a sliding catch in center field in the ninth inning to save a run in a close game, and as Tyler Wells got the save. So what we've seen from Cowser, I mean, he robbed home runs in back-to-back games last week, and you could argue that those weren't even his most impressive plays that he made, tracking down a couple of fly balls in the outfield. We've seen him do it with the arm, off balance, throwing guy out at second. I mean, some really impressive stuff we've been seeing from Cowser, who's always had the tools defensively to be a star center fielder. Obviously was a Gold Glove finalist in left field in 2024, but now after kind of falling out of the everyday center field job over there over this couple of months of the season, now has earned it back, and I don't think he's going to be given up the rest of the year.
Matt, maybe this is slightly a premature question, but considering there's a chance that Josh on the next episode, and then you guys have draft stuff, and this might be our last time chatting on the pod before the All-Star break. When you look back at the first half of the season for the Orioles, who obviously they're 7 games below 500, have had moments where you feel like, again, here we talked about this last week, like here come the Orioles, and then they've had so many more moments where they just unfurl, and you start to wonder whether this team really has it in them to make this some kind of run. What would you say is your rose, bud, and thorn for the Orioles? Or what should the Orioles' rose, bud, and thorn be from the first half of the year?
Yeah, I'd say rose would probably
You're
be
familiar with the
catching
concept, I should clarify.
Yes.
Okay.
Which actually defined bud for me again.
That's the thing.
I know rose and thorn.
Bud is something you're looking forward to, is getting better.
Getting better, something improving. Okay.
Yeah. Let me fact check myself. Bud is an opportunity, new idea, or something you're looking forward to. I was right.
Okay. I'm going to say Rose would be the catching tandem, as we talked about. It has been the best thing about this team so far this year has been the play of Adley Rutschman and Samuel Basallo. From start to finish, both of them have been very good players. And Basallo certainly being a guy who is so important to their future, for him to take the step that we were hoping to see from him as a rookie. For him to do it so far has been really exciting for this fan base and exciting for this team moving forward. The Bud, I would just say the rotation kind of rounding into form. We weren't really sure what to expect out of this group. I mean, I was high on it coming into the year. I'll admit that. You can pull back the tape from spring training. I was hyping up this rotation as maybe one of the underrated rotations in baseball. And I think we're starting to see what that kind of looks like now, with Trevor Rogers, having a bit of a rough spell, but kind of getting back into kind of being the player he was in the second half of last year. Kyle Bradish took some time, first full season back from Tommy John, and now is starting to look like Kyle Bradish again. Shane Baz was a project. We knew that coming in, and we've started to see some really good things from him. They obviously lose Zach Eflin, but Brandon Young has stepped in really admirably in that role. Chris Bassett wasn't as advertised, but now Dean Kramer is back healthy. Had a good first start off the IL. Maybe he's going to be somebody who could provide some stability at the back end of that rotation. So I think there's a lot to like about this group. It's maybe not shaken out the way that we thought it would coming into the year, but certainly it has looked a lot like the kind of potential that we thought that it might have back in spring training. And then the thorn, I just think it's got to be Gunnar Henderson's play at the plate. I mean, he is so important to this team. Maybe not the face of the franchise, but its best player. And Henderson has just not been able to kind of shake off the swing and miss that has plagued him at the plate this year. Did have a nice series after being moved to the leadoff spot at the end of the homestand, but then took a step back offensively over the weekend. So, it's a up and down thing. Maybe he comes out of the All-Star break hot. He's obviously not going to be an All-Star this year, so he'll get the chance to kind of rest and reset. Maybe that's what he needs, just a couple of days off his feet. Who knows? A guy who's pressing and really trying to turn his season around with one swing, it looks like at times. Maybe that's what he's going to need. But so far, as far as what has been the most disappointing thing and thing that kind of actively hurt them with how much they rely on him and have him at the top of the lineup every day, they need Gunnar Henderson to be Gunnar Henderson again.
Yeah, he had, I think we talked about this in the last episode where he was really struggling, but even just a little bit of movement in the lineup gave him a little bit of a spurt. Just get the engine going a little bit. So as you said, maybe a couple days off his feet really kind of helps him relax, reset, and come out as Gunnar Henderson that we know so well.
100%. And as they close out this first half here, as I mentioned, they're going to be playing the Cubs and the Royals over this next week. The Cubs coming in red hot. They're in sole possession of the top wildcard spot in the National League. The Royals, on the other hand, really struggling. They're last place in the AL Central. So two kind of teams at the opposite end of the spectrum there. But for the Orioles, 6 games standing between them and the All-Star break. You'd really feel good about things if you're able to go forward to at least on this homestand after taking 2 or 3 against the Reds to be able to finish the end of the first half there. That would be 6-3 to close it out. A solid run, or I think it would be 7-3 because of the win before that. So 7-3 to close out the first half. As disappointing as it's been to this point, that was kind of their rock bottom, as we talked about on the last episode. If they can go 7-3 from that rock bottom, you feel pretty good about, okay, maybe they're building something here. We'll see what it looks like after the All-Star break. So it's going to be tough to win a series against the Cubs. Like I said, they're playing really well, and they've actually been really beat up by injuries and are playing just as well, if not better, amid all the injuries. Pete Crow Armstrong has been an MVP candidate again, looking like for them, really rounded into form over the last month or so. So that's going to be a tough series for sure. But the Royals one, you'd expect them to take 2 or 3, maybe even sweep with the way that team has been playing of late in this Orioles and how desperately they need it. Every team against every series against an American League team, whether they're good or not, it matters. So we'll see what this team can do. I mean, they've been inconsistent all year. It's hard to just look at a little stretch from them and be like, they're building something here, because it's almost like the boy who cried wolf at this point. You don't want to be saying, oh, they're back, until you really are for sure. And we just have not seen that kind of sustained success from them over weeks and weeks at a time. So maybe they're building something here, maybe they're not. We'll just have to kind of wait and see over the next week.
I was going to say, it feels like we've had so many like State of the Union conversations on this pod about the Orioles, which is fair, considering they're a team that was supposed to be a deep playoff contender and they're 7 games below 500, that it feels like every few weeks when things aren't getting better, you kind of have to check in and be like, okay, what isn't working? Why isn't this working? But now we got to remind ourselves, like, there's a lot of baseball left for them to finally get to that 4th win in a row, or maybe that 5th win in a row, and really turn things around. Because maybe in 2 months we're having a totally different conversation about this Orioles team, for good or for better or for worse.
We'll see, man. It's we'll be out there. Or I'll be out there all week. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to MLB draft next weekend. Going to have a ton of stuff going up on BaltimoreSun.com around the draft. Orioles at the number 7 pick, pretty high draft selection for them. So a lot of intriguing names that could be available to them in that first round. We'll also have the Futures game, where we get to see Ike Irish and Joseph Jurwa, 2 of the Orioles' top prospects, playing on a national stage. And then the All-Star game, Home Run Derby next week. I'll be out there in Philadelphia. Looking forward to getting out there, taking that Amtrak up Monday morning. So super pumped for the next week. A lot of fun stuff for you guys, and early birds will be along for the ride as well. So, Sam, any final words for the good people?
Just want to make sure we all remember when Adley Rutschman dressed like he was from like Pirates of the Caribbean for All-Star Weekend. He was asked, he was reminded how important it is to wear a fun and interesting suit on the red carpet for the All-Star game, and he said he was going to have to find something fun or interesting to watch. And I was going to ask you what you might wear if you're on the red carpet, but that feels like way too hard of a question on the spot, because it would have to be weird enough that it's not something you've already been thinking about, unless
Right.
of course you've spent any time having this conversation with your lovely wife, because
Well, I was going to say, I'd have to consult with my designers, aka my wife. So let me get back to you on the next episode. I think I'll have some ideas. Brian O'Hearn had a great orange line suit. I think I'd go for something like understated but unique, something like that.
Yeah.
So
Adley
that's
had
kind
a
of my vibe.
nice Adley had a nice, more like, it was like a tan, I don't know, wasn't like a camo, but it was like a tan pattern, looked like strokes of a paintbrush. Really nice suit in 23. But yeah, in 24 he had it was an odd look. I think he caught some heat on the internet for it. So be interesting to see whatever he pulls out for this All-Star break.
He's been known to show up to Clubhouse in some, pricey outfits, I'll say, from time to time.
Yes.
So
Let's face the franchise.
definitely-
You gotta get funky.
we'll see what he does. I'm looking forward to that. He's Sam Cohn. I'm Matt Weyrich. Really appreciate y'all listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Give us 5 stars on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you guys get your podcasts, and give us a follow on social media at Sun Early Birds on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Thank y'all so much, and have a good one.